Hello, Tal Ben Shahar. Thank you very much for your interview. Can you tell the Dutch public who you are?
Well, I'm a student and a teacher in the field of the science of happiness. Um, Also, I did live in Holland for uh, for a few months when I was playing professional squash. I actually trained with the Dutch team. I lived in Wijk bij Dierstede. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, but that's where I live nevertheless.
Ah, really? Wijk bij Duurstede. Yes, nice, great. So you know Holland a little bit. You know the.
I do and love Holland very much, and I'm delighted to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. Maybe next time we can invite you in real person in Holland. It will be great.
I hope soon.
Yes, good, fantastic. So for the people who don't know you, who are you?
So I'll give it a bit of background. I was after playing squash professionally, I went to study at Harvard, and I studied computer science. And I found myself in my second year of studies doing very well academically. I still continue to play squash. I did well there. I was doing okay socially, and yet I was very unhappy. And it didn't make sense to me because, when I looked at my life from the outside in, things looked great. I thought I checked all the boxes. But from the inside, it didn't feel that way. And I remember it was a very cold Boston winter morning. And I got up and went to my academic advisor and I told her that I'm switching majors. And she said, what to? And I said, I'm leaving computer science, moving over to philosophy and psychology. And she said, why? And I said, because I have two questions. And the first question is, why aren't I happy? Second question, how can I become happier? And I went on to get my undergraduate degree and then further study in psychology and philosophy and education, all the time focusing on how can I help myself, individuals, couples, organizations, and ultimately nations increase levels of well-being. And that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years.
Fantastic, great, great. And what is your biggest enlightenment in your traveling through the discovering of happiness and well-being?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is my biggest enlightenment, but my first realization was about the relationship between success and happiness. So implicitly or explicitly, most people, certainly in the West, have internalized the belief that once you achieve a certain goal, a certain objective, a certain milestone, then you'll be happy. It could be making so much money, or it could be reaching, this level in the organization, or attaining this prestige, or starting this, having this relationship, or gaining this popularity. It doesn't matter, but some milestone or a number of milestones, and then I've checked the boxes, and then I'll be happy. It turns out that that's not the case. Now, this is one school of thought, again, mostly associated with the West. On the other side, mostly, not only, but mostly associated with the East, is saying, look, ultimately success or achieving goals, that doesn't make you happy, certainly not in the long term. Yeah, it will lead to a spike in happiness, but not long-term happiness. It's not about the future, it's all about the here and now. It's all about the present. If you're able to focus on the present moment, then you'll find happiness. And then we have these two voices, these two schools of thought in conflict: future orientation versus present orientation, goals orientation versus the here and now. The thing, though, is that even when we do focus just on the here and now, that's not enough, because as human beings, we are future-oriented creatures. We are about goals. We do care about improving. We do care about getting better. We do care about milestones. So where does the truth about happiness lie? And the answer is in the synthesis of these two worlds. Not in the middle, because I don't even know what the middle means, but in the synthesis of these two worlds. Meaning, we do need a future goal. We do need a milestone that we strive for. We do need something meaningful and purposeful that we aspire to. That's part of our nature, and we need to respect our nature. Now, once we have this purposeful future goal, then we can let go of it and focus on the present. Then we can focus on the steps necessary, needed to get to this future goal. And happiness resides in the present while we're on the way to a future purposeful goal. So I'll give you a personal example, which I hope will make this clear. So my publisher told me recently that that she wants my next book out by April 27. Now, this is a future goal that for me is meaningful. You know, I'm a writer. It's important for me. I'm writing about happiness in difficult times, you know, what the world is going through now. So this is, you know, personally meaningful, purposeful. It's a goal. April 27th, I have a very clear date. Now that I have that, I don't need it anymore. All that I need is to know that every day I wake up in the morning, turn to this computer and write for 3 to 4 hours. In the here and now, that's what I'm doing. And I enter a state of flow, which is full immersion in the here and now. I'm enjoying the present moment. Now, the future goal liberates me, frees me up to be in the present moment. Because if I didn't have this future goal, I would get up in the morning and say, what should I do today? Should I write, or should I spend more time with my kids? Or should I, you know, maybe read a bit? Or I'd be more confused. Now I'm very clear. It helps to liberate me to enjoy the present. And this is how you synthesize future purpose and present pleasure.
Ah, fantastic. Really clear example. Yeah, so this is actually how you bring the future wish and the here and now together. And I think it's also can bring you a reason to get out of bed.
Yeah, it's exactly that. You know, Friedrich Nietzsche wrote back in the 19th century, when you have a why, every how becomes possible. Exactly. You know, when you have a why do I wake up in the morning? You know, what's the reason? What's the purpose? Then you can overcome difficulties and hardships. And, you know, we all have difficulties and hardships. Now, by the way, of course, more than usual. But even when, you know, when there's apparently smooth sailing and there is no pandemic and, you know, and the economy is fine and things are generally fine, people still struggle. We all still struggle when we have a sense of meaning and purpose that really helps us deal with these hardships.
And this purpose is most of the time something, for example, you writing a book right now, and this is not only for yourself, but it brings something bigger. It gets, let's say, over you, right?
Yeah, that's a very important point to bring up. It's a very important point when it comes to leading an ethical life. It's also an important point for leading a happy life, which to my mind are two sides of the same coin. The moral is the practical when it comes to life's ultimate currency, which is happiness. But let me say a bit more on that. You know, many people take issue with the science of happiness, with my field, and they say, you know, it's selfish, and it's just for the you know, it's for the privileged. And there are so many problems in the world. And again, I'm not even talking about the current state. There's poverty, and there is war, and there is hatred, and there is divisiveness. And you're talking about happiness? Really? It's selfish. Now, they have a point. You know, happiness, or the science of happiness, is concerned with the individual's pursuit of the good life or of a better life. And in that, it's selfish. Now, you open the thesaurus and you look for synonyms for selfish. What do you find? Selfish equals egotistic. It equals inconsiderate. It equals evil, immoral. And no one wants to be all these things. So selfishness has gotten a bad reputation in our culture. Now you go to the other side and you look at the selfless, and you look at synonyms for selfless: altruism, generosity, kindness. Now, we all want to be selfless, according to this definition. Not selfish, but yes, selfless. So how do we even begin to pursue happiness? We feel like it's an immoral, unethical pursuit. But here lies the answer. The problem is not in the pursuit. The problem is in our language. The problem is in the distinction that people make, or that people made, because this is an old problem, philosophically, between selfishness and selflessness as bad versus good. That's not the case, because we also know that people who pursue happiness, who increase their levels of well-being, they're actually more generous. They're actually kinder towards other people. Now, we also know that when we're generous and kinder towards other people, that contributes to our happiness. And when we're happier, we're more likely to help others, to be good, to be kind, which it will in turn make us happier. In other words, there's potentially a self-reinforcing loop of generosity. When we're generous towards others, that reflects back on us, making us more generous, and on and on. So I prefer, rather than talking about am I selfish or selfless, to talk about being self-full. And self-full is the integration of concern for oneself and, not or, and concern for others. And there are potentially two sides of the same generosity spiral.
Beautiful. Yeah, I just, it's interesting because I just gave a course about compassion, and it is exactly this. Yes, when you...
Yes, so I have to say something about compassion, because, the Dalai Lama, when he first came to visit the West, he was really taken aback by the fact that so many Westerners don't like themselves. That self-esteem is even an issue here. He says in Tibet, it's not. It's a foregone conclusion. Yeah, of course I like myself. Whereas in the West, it's not. And he didn't understand it until he realized important differences in language. And he said that in the West, the way we define compassion is usually automatically compassion towards others. Whereas he said in Tibetan, the word for compassion is tsewe. In Tibetan, tsewe means compassion for self first, and by extension for others. Taking care of yourself, and therefore you can also take care of others. We're part of the same whole. Mm-hmm. In many ways, it's like going on a plane. Remember the days when we used to fly? This was BC, before Corona. And it's first put your oxygen mask on first, so that you can help others. And with tsewe, with compassion, with selffulness, it's the same idea. Two sides of the same system.
Yeah, and you in one of your interviews, you also used the word Natan in Hebrew, right? This is for gratefulness, I think. But I think it's the same structure.
It's the same idea. So my favorite. So my mother tongue is Hebrew, and my favorite word in Hebrew is actually a biblical word, which is the word to give. And in Hebrew, the word to give is Natan. And Natan is it would be the Nathan, as the name is in Hebrew. It's Natan, and Natan would be spelled in Roman letters Natan. Natan. It's a palindrome. It's symmetrical, and it's no coincidence. There's a lot of wisdom in ancient languages, and Natan, giving, Natan, right back. I'm given right back.
Yeah, so actually this is the same with compassion, to give and to it's the same energy actually. To both get better.
Yes, it's a win-win. It's a positive sum game rather than a negative sum game or a zero sum game. Everyone benefits. And this is the essence of the science of happiness. This is, to my mind, the reason for being of the science of happiness, the fact that it is a win-win.
Yes, exactly. And I think this is also about gratitude. This is one of the most important thing when we talk about happiness, right? To be grateful and yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of research on gratitude, and for example, writing down a few things, 3 things, 4 or 5 things for which you're grateful. And by the way, this is what I do every night on my
Yeah.
notebook before going to bed.
Yeah.
Um, Writing these things down actually contributes not just to our happiness, it contributes to our physical health. So our immune system strengthens. And again, what does it take? 2 minutes. It makes us more generous, kinder towards other people. As well as to our success. Once again, a win-win practice. Now, the interesting thing is why? Why do 2 minutes of writing down things for which I'm grateful every night? What does that contribute to our well-being so much? And the answer is because what that does is very often begin that upward spiral that I was talking about. Because I feel a little bit better when I focus on the good things in my life, when I appreciate the things for which I'm grateful. So I feel a little bit better. So as a result, I'm a little bit nicer to the person I'm speaking to. And it's because I'm nicer to that person, they're nicer to me. They often reflect back my behavior. And they're nicer to me, I feel better. And then maybe I do my work a little bit better. And it goes on and on. It impacts. It ripples and ripples outwards and creates an overall better life. It doesn't just affect the 2 minutes when I'm focused on expressing gratitude.
Yeah, interesting. And is gratitude also important in these times of stress? Can it help us?
Yeah. So very much so. In fact, the way I see it right now, the purpose of the science of happiness is to help us grow as we struggle through hardships and difficulties, because we are struggling. And when I say we, I'm struggling too. What the science of happiness can do for us in these difficult times is strengthen our psychological immune system. Now, to have a strong immune system doesn't mean one doesn't get sick. It just means one gets sick less often. And when you do get sick, you recover more promptly. So a strong psychological immune system doesn't mean you don't feel sad or anxious or frustrated or angry or envious or any of the painful emotions. We feel them. But a strong psychological immune system means we feel them less often. And when we do, we recover more promptly. And this is one of the primary purposes in general of the science of happiness. It's the primary purpose as society is going through difficulties. This is research that literally came out over the last couple of days, showing, not surprisingly, that levels of stress and depression are the highest we'd ever measured. And again, they probably were higher in World War II, or maybe higher during the previous pandemic 102 years ago. But since we started measuring systematically, the highest they'd ever been.
Yes, and what as a small human like you and me are, what can we do? What can I do tomorrow or today? What you say, it's most important to live in the present, right?
Yeah, again, change starts with oneself. Change then extends to one's nears and dears, and then expands outwards, just like the ripples of a stone. And because if we do affect ourselves, by extension, we're also more likely to want to help others and therefore help them. But also just the mere presence of a smile or of an ear of kindness, this in and of itself can contribute to others and start their upward spiral. So what can we do specifically? I'll give just a few examples in addition to what I spoke about. Physical exercise. It seems trivial, almost seems like a luxury. It's not. It's a deep human need. And there is research showing that regular physical exercise has the same effect on our psychological well-being as our most powerful psychiatric medication.
Yes.
In fact, it works in the same way. It works exactly in the same way as anti-anxiety drugs, and it works in the same way as antidepressants. Now, does this mean if someone is on psychiatric medication, they should throw it out the window and then go to the gym instead? Far from it. There are people whose lives were saved by psychiatric medication. But what the research is saying is that we need to start treating physical exercise as an intervention, as a very important intervention. For example, now we have 3 kids, and they're at school doing it on Zoom, and struggling like so many other kids are. My number one concern right now is not their academics, though I do ask them and help when I can. My number one concern now is that every day they get exercise. I think it's always extremely important. It's especially important today. My number one concern with my parents, that's what I always ask. So did you exercise today? Did you go for your walk? And when they can't go out on a walk because they're in a lockdown, I don't care. Walk around your home, just up and down 1,000 times, but exercise, move. It's so important for, of course, physical well-being as well as for psychological well-being. So that's one example. Another example that I gave is expressing gratitude on a regular basis. But perhaps the most important thing that we can do for both for happiness and for dealing with hardship is cultivate relationships. I'll share with you one of my favorite studies, and probably one of the most extensive studies ever conducted in psychology. So this was done at Harvard in the 1930s. And the researchers started a study that followed Harvard students as well as community members from around the university, followed them for 75 years. So for most of them, it was for the rest of their lives. And after 75 years of collecting data, whether it's questionnaires, whether it's observations, whether later on when they had the technology, physiological data, later on neurological data. So any kind of study you can imagine, they did it. So collecting millions and millions of data points, 75 years, they asked a question. And the question was, what is the number one predictor of happiness? Now, there are many predictors to happiness, but they asked what the number one predictor of happiness is. In statistical terms, what accounts for most of the variance when you explain an individual's happiness? And the answer, number one predictor, relationships. Now, the interesting thing is it didn't matter what kind of relationships, meaning for some it was a partner who they were with for 20 years or 50 years or 5 years. For others, it was family or extended family or their best friends or relationships at work that were supportive. It actually didn't matter. But they had strong, supportive, intimate relationships. Not perfect relationships, but they had those relationships. Number one predictor of happiness. Now, interestingly, they also asked a second question. Looking at all the data, 75 years, what's the number one predictor of health? Now, there are many predictors. For example, physical exercise surely is an important predictor of health. Nutrition, of course, is an important predictor of health. But the number one predictor? Relationships. And once again, it didn't matter what kind of relationships, with whom, as long as they were supportive, intimate, caring relationships. So cultivating relationships is important. Now, it's of course more challenging now. I haven't hugged my parents in a year. They're a high-risk group. I can't tell you how much I miss their touch. There are friends I haven't seen, good friends I haven't seen for a year because there's no travel or there's very little travel now. So what do we do when sometimes relationships are relegated to technology, to the screen? The answer is that we still need to cultivate maybe not in-person relationships, that's more challenging, but deep relationships. You can still have a deep conversation on Zoom or WebEx. You can still have a deep conversation on the phone. You want to go further? You can still cultivate deep relationships through letter writing. You know, some of our most beautiful literature is as a result of an exchange of letters of two minds that met around ideas. It's possible to cultivate deep relationships even in this imperfect reality.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think also like the exercise on gratitude, that is also nice to write a letter to somebody where you're really thankful, and maybe even read it to the person, maybe on Zoom, or it can also be really and small light in this time. I think it's very important.
Yeah, you know, Marty Seligman, who's a professor at the University of Pennsylvania and considered the father of the field of positive psychology, introduced this gratitude letter exercise in his class. And he asked students to write a gratitude letter to someone, and ideally to go to that person if they could, or to call them up and to read them that letter. And he said that in his, at that time, 35 years of teaching, he had never encountered such a powerful intervention, such a powerful experience in his classroom. And he and Christopher Peterson went on and did some research on it. And they indeed discovered that the impact of writing a letter is extraordinary on the person writing it, on the person receiving it, and of course, on the relationship. That's a big win-win.
Yeah, beautiful. And there's the Nathan again in the letter.
Exactly.
Yeah, very nice.
Give is to receive.
Yes, 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 beautiful. And my last question for you, what is your wish for the future?
So, you know, my wish for the future is that the science of happiness is taught in schools, in organizations, for young and old, just like mathematics is taught, just like writing is taught, just like any other topic is taught. We have a science of happiness. We know how to help people become happier. We know how to help people enjoy better relationships. We know how to help people become more resilient, better able to deal with hardship. And if we teach these ideas in schools, and when I say schools, I mean from, you know, the age of 3 and all the way through university and beyond, because becoming happier is a lifelong journey. It's not like, okay, I'm happy now, that's, you know, enough. We can always become happier. It's a lifelong journey. Teaching it will not only make our world happier, it will also make our world better. We will not just benefit in terms of our well-being, we'll also benefit in terms of our ethics.
Exactly. Thank you very much. It was a really beautiful interview, and I look forward to your book in April, and I hope also to invite you in Holland, and real person. It will be great, and yeah, let's keep in touch. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the important work that you do on ethics and well-being.
Thank you very much.